throat, that's why. I would first like to acknowledge 4 generations of the Ayers family sitting here. My son, my grandson, and his wife, my 2 great-grandchildren, and myself. It's 4 generations of us. My 2 grandchildren, Connor and Catherine, are twins. So we're also very fortunate to have twins in our family. I was a student at the University of Wisconsin, and one day my roommate came to me and said, "We don't want to be drafted, do we?" I said, "No. Let's go down and enlist in naval aviation," which we promptly did that morning. That began a long, wonderful career in the Navy. I don't think I ever had a duty station. It wasn't a good duty station. I never had experience. It wasn't a good experience. After being signed up, I still had to go down to Chicago and get my widowed mother's permission. Because at that time, even at 19, you had to have permission to go into naval aviation. The training process was real strict. It only took 2 into the Navy aviation. About 50% made the screening process. And after that, it was into what we call elimination training. Before getting into that, I'd like to mention today, I'm probably going to vary a little bit from some of the descriptions in here. I'd like to take you through a very quick insight into what a naval aviator in World War II was going through to become a naval aviator. It wasn't easy. We had a lot of hard things to do, a lot of ground school, pre-flight school, where I boxed with didn't know it, but when I got knocked down, I boxed with a Milwaukee Golden Gloves champion. I found myself on my butt. But that was one of many things that happened to me. But what I'm going to do is give you a brief insight of the training of a World War II naval aviator, participation in World War II, and then what happens to the post-World War II, or what happened to the World War II aviators who decided to make a career. What did I do, and how did it happen, and what was exciting, and so forth. I had never been in an airplane. Never stepped foot in an airplane in 1942 when I decided to become a naval aviator. And it was a real thrill when I first got into an N2S. I've flown most of the planes, maybe I hadn't flown that Japanese one, but I've flown a lot of the planes that are around this in this hangar here. And the N2S was my first plane. And how many naval aviators do we have here? Yeah, well, did you all fly the N2S? No, that was before your time. Well, the N2S was our primary trainer, and we called it the Yellow Peril. The location of our training, our primary training, was elimination bases. The reason for elimination-based name, and that was also something that was hung on to the primary training, is that about 50% of those who entered flight training would not become aviators. About 45% were loaded, get rid of at the elimination phase. Flying N2Ss, either for one reason or another, lack of flight aptitude, fear of flying, inability to adapt to close flying, and things that the Navy did. A few of them, they asked to be out because of the flying. I just want a few things I remembered specifically from my E-base training. One was the first solo. First time, after 8 quick flights in about 10 days, we were soloed, and that started the training routine. And everything from the E-base on to primary training, for operational training, and intermediate basic training was geared towards training and flying aboard aircraft. But there's a division in here, which I'll tell you, where the single-engine pilots went one way, the carrier and the multi-engine pilots went both ways, the other way. The initial thing I remember was learning out of the stall. And I still remember this to this day when I think about it, when I see so many accidents, especially small aircraft, that find themselves nose up, not enough power on, into the ground. That's one of the first things we learned. The next thing that we got, the instructor would take us up unknown to ourselves. We have what we call a Gosport tube. You spoke through a tube with just a little hose that went back to the instructor pilot in the back seat. He'd say, he also has controls after cut power off. He said, now where are you going to land this thing? You look around, look around. Well, I'm going to try to make that feel a little better. You bring it in. Okay. You would make the fence, put it in. He said, you crashed. Try it again. Acrobatics was another thing here too. The loops were used later on in my flight training when we were doing special weapons delivery. Split S's were used to come right down on top of a fighter plane that you were approaching head on, an enemy fighter that you would come right upside down on top of the plane. Spins, that's another thing that was very interesting, especially the inverted spin. How many of you have ever done an inverted spin? I feel few here. I tell you, that's a thrill, isn't it? I tell you, you go up, you would go into a loop, and from there, hold the nose horizon, and let it stall out. Like this, like this. You fall right against your shoulder harness. You come away from the seat, you think I'm going to fall out of here. Well, you don't. That's a level that I can remember, and then came the formation flying. I wanted to be a carrier pilot, so we had our nighttime in there to it. Lo and behold, what they're going to do the simulated carrier then? They put out 12 smoke pots, send about 8 or 10 planes up in the air, try to keep a formation, and try to put it right down between those smoke pots. That was the initial concept of what a flight deck is going to look like. After our primary training, we were divided into two groups of people, two groups of aviators. That was pretty much based on your performance in the E-phase, if you survived the E-phase. And my choice was always fighter aircraft. But along with the fighter aircraft would be the dive bombers and the torpedo bombers. We'd go one direction. We would go to Corpus Christi, Texas. The multi-engine went to Pensacola. Those would be the ones flying the land-based bombers as well as the CBY, which you see here. As I said, I was pleased to go to the single-engine training. We would start out with a familiarization flight. Then the air combat training came on, which would first be demonstrated instructor, student, tried to get on the other one scale, do whatever maneuver you could to get on the scale. Then it became student on student. All these performances were being graded. And out of this grading system would come your graduation in Navy wings. I can remember getting my Navy wings from a great Marine aviator, Colonel Lloyd Magnan, almost like the golfer. He was the one who presented me my wings at Corpus Christi, and there onto Lee Field in Jacksonville, in Cold Springs, and Corsair. The Corsair, probably, like the introduction Rob gave me, was probably one of the finest fighters ever built. It was fast, it was maneuverable, it was beautiful. On carrier, it was easy, nice to operate on a carrier. You had your flight deck personnel could maneuver you, take you where you wanted to go, and so forth. In the air, it was beautiful. On the land, it was a little bit of a bugger, especially the old F4U-1, which we have FG-1, I believe, out here. The F4U-1 had a high tail wheel. It had, like this plane, 17 feet 4 inches between the propeller and the cockpit. You couldn't see where you were taxiing. You had S-turn, completely S-turn, so you weren't running over the next thing because you could not see beyond the nose of that aircraft. court, you could not start going straight down the runway on F4U1. You had to angle it halfway down the runway and the truck would bring you off and you hope you stayed on the runway by the time you got there. It was a son of a gun. But once airborne, it was beautiful. In the operational training, we spent a lot of time on, of course, getting ready for combat, aerial gunnery. And that was fun also, firing on the sleeve. We have a Corsair, and the student pilots would also take turns going to sleeve. Pilots would keep behind the airplane would be a wide banner, maybe 10 feet wide and 20 feet long. Each one of us had different colored ammunition. And we would do runs, overhead runs, and we would be scored when we got back. Colored ammunition would tell you how many hits did I have, how many hits did the other pilot have. So that's the way we kept track. If we were going to be successful, and they required a minimum of 5% hits out of 200 rounds that we had. One of the biggest things in the operational training was, of course, getting ready to go board carriers. We had, first of all, let me backtrack. All of our pilots at Lee Field in Corsair training were Marine pilots. They were the only ones that had flown in combat up to that time. Guadalcanal, Esperanto, all of the early engagements, Midway, and so forth. So we had great instructors. As we all know, maybe some of the guests don't know, Marine pilots and field aviators, Marine aviators, but they're all trained together in the same syllabuses. In fact, later on, I had experience on Saratoga having Marine squadrons on board with the Navy squadrons. As I started to say, one of the biggest things in F4U training at Lee Field was learning how to get aboard the carrier. We spent hours and hours and hours on field carrier landing. Minimum of 100 land passes to qualify, and some of them would go up to 1,000 before they could get the feel of coming aboard ship. We also did a lot of bombing there, and when finished, we were passed on to the next stage, which would be carrier qualification in Glenview at the Great Lakes steamer, the USS Sable, which was a sideboat. However, before going up the Great Lakes for carrier qualification, a friend of mine and I had a little time before we could test the plane, so we decided to check out one of the old F4Us and take a flight, take our last flight there at Lee Field. We went up to about 35,000 feet, and I was leading, and I said, hey, let's see how fast these things really will go. So we put it in about a 30-degree dive, and about 12 to 14,000 feet, the plane started to shake a little bit, and I looked down, we were getting close to 500 knots. And I said, we better pull out of this thing. Well, we soon learned we didn't have any communications with each other. We pulled off all of our antennas on this. So then, I made a pass out of the tower, and they gave us a green light to land. They knew we rocked the wings. We didn't have any communications. We landed, everything was fine, and it wasn't very long after that, a superintendent Whiteman called myself and my wingman up there and said, do you know what you were doing up there? I said, yes, we were just seeing how fast the plane was going. He said, did you know you could pull rivets off the side of the airplane, off the wings of the airplane? No. No. Well, the whole really trust of the story was, he said, you two are going to make good fighter pilots. That's all we're doing how we got. I wrote all this stuff down because I'm 87 years old. I can't remember this just like this did. I'm going to just jump a little bit in here now. I had an opportunity to cross-train. Not many naval aviators have cross-trained. I've flown about 45 different airplanes, and of that amount, I would say, at least one-third were multi-engine aircraft. I had a chance to go into seaplane training, so I took the opportunity.
I'll tell you the reason why later on, but I decided to go down to, went from Glenview, where I was flying 4 years after World War II, and I went down and I took PBM training. Of course, that's a much later era seaplane than this one is here. Took PBM training, which I found to be very interesting. It's really different. It's like flying and also driving a boat, especially when you're on the water. You got difficulty with currents and all to make the buoy high up so you'd be brought ashore up the ramp. After that training, I went to Hawaii, to Barbers Point, Kaneohe, and then to a PBY squadron out there. Its main mission was search and rescue, and we had detachments at Samoa, Wake Island, and Kwajalein. One of my first tours was out at Kwajalein, and the flying of the PBY was relatively a simple aircraft. It takes off at 65 knots, climbs at 85 knots, flies at 85 knots, flies at 85 knots, and lands at 65 knots. No problem. So we found a lot of fun. Being assigned to a detachment that was going to Kwajalein, one of our missions out there was support of the atom bomb test, us search and rescue, and also support of the islands out there that were previously Japanese islands and Micronesian islands. And we would fly missionaries around. We would fly injured natives from the island to Kwajalein for hospitalization and medical care. But the fun part of it was to go to these islands. We drop our landing gear, actually up on the white sand beach, and then be met by the natives there. And we'd offload our cargo. Then we usually have lunch with them, board, bread, piece of bread, what am I trying to think of? Bread plan anyhow. And after lunch, we had a plane captain. I'm pleased to hear you say you have a plane captain at the PBY coming to be posted on. But he was a character, the one we had. He would had a portable patrol. After lunch, you take that patrol out, and we would go on after lunch. You get the patrol going. Excuse me, I'll feel the drive. Get the big trawler going before long and have all the natives out there dinner buzzing with the crew. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. That was quite an experience, and I remember it very well. Another experience in PBY, I was at Barbers Point flying in a P-2V squadron at that time. And they didn't have anyone to pick up a PBY at Alameda to ferry it out to Manor Naval Forces Far East in Tokyo. So I volunteered, we got a crew together, went to San Francisco, Alameda, picked up the PBY, did a test flight on it, and 2 days later we were on the way to Hawaii. 21 hours and 30 minutes later, we landed in Hawaii. It was almost a full day. The rest of the day or two went on then to Johnson Island, to Guam, to Inawita, and then into Tokyo. About a total of 65 hours to get to Tokyo. I delivered the plane at night to the Haneda Airport, which then was in the military airport. And I said, well, I've done my job. No, we want to deliver it to Yokosuka, which is the naval station where the Japanese used to have all their seaplanes. It was a little windy, and I thought, well, this shouldn't be much of a problem. I made quite a few water landings in the PBY, so took off, flew around, got my orientation on the Yokosuka from Haneda, called in, got permission to land, landed over the top of the seawall. At that point, the waves were probably 6 or 8 feet, choppy. I said, well, we'll get down all right, plopped it in and landed just like PBY is supposed to land on rough water. But before
before long, we began to see the nose was getting heavy, getting heavier and heavier. Well, when they took the nose turret out of the plane, we found out later, they took the nose turret out and they put a seal around it. And the seal was supposed to be sealed. Here we got the ramp, the heavier the plane nose got, the more we were digging down in the water and the more power we had. I frankly didn't think we were going to make it in to the ramp. If we made it to the ramp, I was afraid the nose wheel was going to shear off. That we had 100% power, full power, turning up 3,000 RPM when we hit that ramp. And the Japanese manning the paddles to bring us in. Hit that thing, it held together. Backed up, must have dumped 200 gallons of water out of the nose of that airplane. The seal had never been properly installed, and it going out in and out of the waves, it just took on water. Well, they asked me if I would check out the local pilot tomorrow morning. I said, no, I've delivered the airplane. That's my duty. Yeah. Spent a few days in Tokyo and came back home. Also, while I was there at Kwajalein, at my experience, my ability, my chance to fly this monster, they had one TBM there that they used for spraying the island. They had a lot of mosquitoes, a lot of bugs out there, but they didn't have anyone to fly it. None of the staff out there had ever flown a single-engine aircraft, and so I volunteered to fly it. Didn't get a checkout, read the handbook, decided to take off, full load of fuel bait, full load of spray, and got airborne, got the wheels up all right. Then I started looking for the throttle control, the vernier control that thing has, and tried to get the throttle propellers back. Then I tried to get my flaps back. Finally got found out, flew around a little bit, and then sprayed the island. Legal flap heading 100 feet above the island. I did that for about the next 4 or 5 weeks, and then that was my extent of my TBM flying. But it was an experience. The other two planes of the group I've flown here, I just flew them briefly, was the P-22 and the T-28. And both of those planes have tricycle landing gear. With the advent of the jet aircraft, you needed a tricycle landing gear, so they transitioned to the PT-22 and the T-28, so they have that experience. I flew that airplane, I guess, for about 8 or 10 years, both of them, for when I was getting just proficiency flight time, 46 to 8 hours a month. But I did have one neat experience in the T-28. I took off from Quonset Point, Rhode Island, when I was at the Naval War College, and I was going to see my sick mother in Wisconsin. And refueled at Niagara Falls, took off, went into a heavy snowstorm over Lake Erie, and I didn't break out of it with the P-28 and flying instruments, and at that time it was the A quadrant and online, so you knew where you're going. I didn't break out until I was almost the other side of Lake Michigan before I broke out of the clouds, and landed at Glenview, and I got I'm here safe. I can almost see my mother. As I said earlier, after the F-42 training, I went to the Sable Big Carrier qualification. That was interesting. It was an old side wheeler, had a very narrow flight deck. Like the carrier I would later fly, it had only 4 arresting gear cables and a barrier. It didn't make it on. You missed the cables, it was into the barrier. We had a lot of young pilots go inside. Fortunately, I did not. And finished my carrier qualification and received orders to an A6 transitional squadron in Los Alamitos. We were getting close at that time to finishing off the war, and the big thing ahead of us, we all knew, was the invasion of Japan. And they were looking for pilots for to take out of the Corsairs and put into F-6s because it was considered a better close air support aircraft. And we transitioned there. Shortly after the relatively brief transition, which we did a lot more gunnery carrier qualification, night carrier qualification,
strafing on moving targets in the Salton Sea. We went to Maui, did further transmissional training there, further qualifications, night carriers, and then on to the USS Calhoun. I don't know how many of you have heard of the USS Calhoun, CVL-25, named after the Battle of Calhoun was in North Carolina. It was a fast carrier. It was a carrier that had been a cruiser hull with a flight deck on it, 70 feet wide. The catapults were, I believe, they were 84 feet long, that's all they were. And had 4 wires, wooden deck, and so forth. But we were right with the Essex class carriers, and did all of our flights with them, all of our combat missions with them. Our first strike was on bypass Wake Island. They had Japanese gunners there that had been there for 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, I guess, since they were bypassed, but they were sure after gunners. I remember going in there about 15,000 bombing, rockets and strafing, and it was going all directions in front of us. And we launched 2 new aviators on that practice run, and that's how active those gunners were. And I think half of our airplane came back with some sort of shrapnel or something in the wings and the fuselage. That was our warm-up for the war zone. And we were under Admiral John McCain. This is John McCain, who just ran for president, his father, on Task Force 38. And we joined the 3rd Fleet with Admiral Halsey. From the 10th of, my duration in the war was not long. It was intense. But what we were all looking for was the support of the invasion of Japan. We did airstrikes on Hokkaido, Honshu, Kyushu, just about all of the Japanese chain. One I particularly remember, though, was a strike on Yasugi Airfield. We were coming in about 17,000 feet. We must have had 20 to 30 aircraft in on this strike. And I can remember letting my bombs go at about 10,000 feet, the rockets about 6,000 or 7,000 feet, and then continue strafing down. And everything was exploding in front of me, and I think I was a little bit eager for the flight. I think I got a little bit too low, and I looked up, and here was a big barrage boom right in front of me. And I squeezed off another 6-8 rounds, and boom, it blew up right in front of me, and it flew right through the top of the planes. What was so scary about it, if I hadn't tried to fly under, the Japanese had what they called piano wire from all the barrage booms. If you hit a piano wire, it would just cut it would cut a wing in half. You hit one. So, while I was a little bit nervous, when I pulled up and saw that thing, it was still a lot better than trying to duck around it, because it probably saved my life. We did a lot of targets of opportunity. By targets of opportunity, and these were usually fighter sweeps, 2 or 4 fighters at most. We'd go in and look for anything. I can remember seeing trains pull into a tunnel. It's a lot of a tunnel. They see us, they back in. We'd wait for them to stick their nose out ahead and fire rockets at them. I once fired a rocket at a large engine, steam engine, and by the time I got over it, about half the engine was just flying up beside me. It just blew up. The targets of opportunity were anything we could find that would move, because there were not many Japanese airplanes in the air at that time. They were saving them for kamikazes and for the defense of the homeland. I did have my one opportunity to shoot one down. There weren't very many opportunities. Anyone calling an F6I? One? Well, we picked up, we were vectored out on a single bogey. We were flying at 35,000 feet. We climbed to 40. Still didn't get up high. We got up to 43,000 feet.
The F6F had a service ceiling of about 39,000 feet. And that was the highest we were supposed to be able to get. So we got our fuel injection on. I was flying on the Air Group Commander's wing. He broke off the right. I broke off the left. He made the first run, hit a dyno at 43,000 feet. I started my run to get it away, put it away, and then my fuel injection cut off, and I started stalling out at 43,000 feet. I spun down 10,000 feet before I started getting control of the aircraft. And when I did get control of the aircraft, the engine was running rough, extremely rough. I called the carrier, which was about 40 miles away, and I said, I need an emergency landing. And then the engine was stirring and fighting all the way in, and it saved landing. I found the engine was completely burned out, threw the engine over the side, and when the flight was over. We continued on flying on strikes, different airfields, a lot of flak. We'd go in at 17,000 feet, and you would see all the puffs here. Didn't want to see them right in front of you, but no real particular incident after that, except I was flying on a strike against Tokyo on, I believe it was the 16th of August of 1945. The voice came up over the radio and said, peace has been declared, turn around and go back. Some pilot came on the air, and I had no idea who it was, and said, what do we do if we encounter an enemy aircraft? Admiral Halsey, who was making the announcement, said, shoot them down in a friendly manner. After the peace was signed, continued to fly, we took prisoner of war evacuation flights. We would go all around looking for different prisoner of war camps, spotting them out so the ground forces could go in and get the prisoners out of there. One of them I remember very clearly, all across the road with big signs that Patrick Boynton is here. So that's where they are, Patrick Boynton now. In some cases, the TBMs would land and have very seriously ill prisoners of war. They'd take prisoners of war, bring them back to Boyd Calkins and treat them in the infirmary there. Also very interesting was the fact that they had to make plans for the treaty on Northern Missouri. And Captain Harold Stassen, later become governor of Minnesota, and was a presidential nominee way back when, was the chief coordinator. And he was supposed to land and make arrangements with the Japanese along with his team to where it would be, what the rules of the meeting would be and so forth. The role of the air group in that was that the 6 or 8 of the TBMs, which had their turret guns, all landed and made a perimeter around the field in case this was another false alarm and we were going to be taken out by the rise of the Japanese. In the fighter planes, we circled above as the combat air patrol until everything was clear. We landed in. They had quite a dinner spread for us. We sat there and observed some of the negotiations that were taken on with regard to how the peace would be settled, and then we took off. In fact, we landed aboard the carrier. The USS Calkins was the first carrier in Tokyo Bay, and all of us young officers had the duty of being walking the streets, 45 on each side, and just looking around, just showing our presence there. Took a train from Tokyo down to Yokosuka, where I delivered the seaplane, and I wanted to go around there and see what the plane was doing and so forth. But it also gave me an opportunity to see the tremendous buildup of Aka bombs and other aircraft that were stored there that were going to be used in the defense, probably most of them kamikaze. The Aka bomb is with 1,000 pounds of high explosive and a pilot in it. Little ailerons on it, rudder, that's all. The point of the Aka bomb, once they're released from one of their heavy bombers, would fly straight in and take out a warship. Tremendous amount of that. I did have that opportunity. We did observe from ashore the people coming for the peace treaty.
sit in the ready room after that and kind of lament that all of our training that we had done for the invasion of Japan was never used. And I think there is really a regret and sorrow from the areas of being in a position but never accomplishing what we were set to do. That soon really turned back to civilian life and going back home. That didn't last very long. But the atomic bomb probably saved thousands and thousands of lives that we don't know about. It certainly saved of Japanese lives. It certainly saved thousands and thousands of Marines and soldiers that would be invading Japan. So we look on things that Harry Truman had done. That's probably one of the most notable things that he ever did was to approve the dropping of the atomic bomb in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. After the war, I returned to flying Corsairs. Just before being discharged, I was offered a commission as a warrant officer. My decision was no. I wanted to go back to college, which I did. I went back to the University of Wisconsin. Only a month or two later, I had an offer for a commission in the regular Navy as an ensign. I didn't have many ensigns going, so we did that somebody at the bottom, I guess. But I, in the meantime, got married, and given the opportunity when I accepted the commission in the regular Navy to transition to the PDMs. My wife was not new to the Navy, and I thought maybe it would be a good idea to have her on the shoulder for a little while. And so we went down to Jacksonville. From Jacksonville, I went to that PBY squadron in Hawaii. Then I started flying PB-4Y2s. The Himalayan Power Fly 4Y2s. That was the old Liberator with a single tail on it. And before long, we got the newer aircraft. We transitioned to the P2V4s. Now, the P2V4s were the first P2Vs to have two jet engines on them. And they were booster engines. They would give the plane a pretty good boost. I was conducting maritime reconnaissance in the South China Sea and Taiwan Straits. Supported the Korean conflict flying out of Okinawa. Did that for about 9 months before I came back. One particular mission I recall, was getting ready to go on what I considered was going to be a routine patrol. And I had an intelligence officer come up to me and said, "We're going to accompany you on this flight." He didn't tell me what we were going to do yet. But we got airborne, went into the Taiwan Straits. He said, "Now I'd like you to divert and go over Foochow." Foochow was a big Chinese airport that was overlooking the Taiwan Straits right across to Taiwan. And I guess it must have been known that they were building up for a threatened invasion of Taiwan. So we flew in there, going pretty fast, looked down, and here's all you need to get, saw us coming, the Navy was beginning to get ready to scramble. And the both jet engines got out of there as fast as we could get out of there. And we were never intercepted, but that could have been an international incident. I've never heard a thing about it, but there was a patrol plane a few years after that was shot down, if you always remember, and the crew was inserted for a short while. I also had 2 tours of P2Vs, one in the Mediterranean. We were stationed on Malta with the Royal Air Force. And the other was in Jacksonville, which we had detachments in Argentia. And the Argentia tour was also extremely interesting. We flew ice reconnaissance, looking for an opening in the passage up to Tule Greenland, where all of the Air Force B-36s were stationed with their atomic bombs position for strike on the Soviet Union. Malta, also very interesting. Not much there, but those catacombs, but it was an interesting place. It was the first time I had real opportunity to be part of another nation's squadron. The Royal Air Force had a squadron there. 1958, after being at the War College, I transitioned into the jets. I flew with Attack Squadron 36. flying A4 Skyhawks. And we continued flying Skyhawks for 3 tours in the Mediterranean. 9 months each, 3 Christmases gone, a son and a sister back home, missed 3 Christmases. In between, we had well, let me go back a little bit. The mission of the aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean, primary mission was delivery of nuclear weapons. That was the mission of the A4 Skyhawk. I had targets in Romania and behind the Iron Curtain, and they were pretty much hope to catch a tank on the way back because we did not have enough fuel for round trips. We did our practice missions over Italy and different places and meeting up with the tankers, so we were all very confident we'd make it. The first tour I was the executive officer of the squadron. At word that my wife got word that he was killed. I saw him being killed when he tried to land on the carrier at the ramp. I became the commanding officer. One of the duties of the commanding officer, which I think is probably the most difficult assignment a commanding officer of a task squadron can make, and that is assigning people to become nuclear weapon delivery pilots. Only 8 out of the squadron of 36 would be picked. Squadron commander and exec were usually one of the 6 to be picked. Pilots, if you pretty much have confidence that they can make the mission, do the target, return. It did create somewhat of a division in the squadron of those who could and those who were not, they were borderline. But we resolved that pretty well by saying, when you become your 3rd year in the squadron, you'll be a delivery pilot also. The maneuver for dropping a nuclear weapon is very interesting also. What it is a loop. You started out at 450 knots, 100% power on the jet. Pull up over the top of it, 65-degree angle. The bomb is released. It goes up, continues up to 20,000 feet, makes a reverse turn, and comes straight back. Half it went up. I had an opportunity to drop a shape on Pine Castle in Florida later on that year. I had the opportunity because they only drop, I think, 1 on each coast on an annual basis to test the delivery system and make any additional alterations and so forth. But when that thing kicked off at about 10,000 feet, it felt like it was just like you were thrown against a wall. They had a charge of, it was about a 3-inch shell charge that kicked that thing away from the airplane. The maneuver then was completed by rolling over on top, dropping it, and reversing, come right back down to the ground to avoid the atomic weapon fallout. So that was the escape route. Also, on the A4 flying, we would also show the flag, had the opportunity to visit many countries in Europe, the airports, came back, did some air shows around the country. Also had, during the Cuban crisis, I had a weapon target on Cuba. I was also flying at the Bay of Pigs and sitting up there at 20,000 feet and watching that invasion go to knock. Big failure. Why they sent us up there, I'm not sure, but they thought we might be used, but we were never called down. After flying those 3 years in 1846, I went through the Army War College, and from there I was assigned to navigator of the nuclear carrier Enterprise. And the mission of the nuclear carrier Enterprise, along with the Cambridge and the Long Beach, the other two, the only 3 nuclear ships at that time, was go around the world and route Magellan. Part of going around the world, we also had the evaluation of the ships, of the GPS, the satellite navigation system. The same thing that you see every day in your car. We were trying to evaluate and see how accurate it was. We departed the med train throughout Gibraltar, went down around South America, Africa rather, and we entertained heads of states for all of the new governments that were in Africa at that time. There were many of them. I think there must be 10 or 12 in the more stops, different countries, which we bring them aboard, do a firepower demonstration for the heads of the government and fly them off the next day. Going into, I'll never forget as navigator, going into Karachi. Nothing was working for me. I'm sure we got some small boat navigators here. When you get a fix that won't cross, the fix is almost as big as your hand. Something was wrong. And I finally told Captain Michaelis, who later became Vice Admiral, head of the Atlantic Fleet here, I said, Admiral, Captain, I recommend you drop anchor. Because we were getting into shallow water. And I didn't want to be caught along with him. So we dropped anchor, went to reception that night by the Karachi Navy. They're talking to some ship officers and the Karachi Navy. So what we're using as to cite your fixes. I told him, he said, well, those have been discarded a long while ago. They're old sharks. We're going in with old sharks. Went into Sydney, Australia. We had a civilian pilot on board taking us in. We got as little as 6 inches under the keel of the carrier that draws. We were drawing 39 or 40 feet at that time. Scary. Then after that, I stayed with the Enterprise for another year and a half. Navigator for our first trip to Vietnam, and we stayed out there for 6 months, flying, supporting all of the aircraft. I enjoyed my navigation, but nothing like flying. My heart was always back in the airplane, not on the sea. After another year or two, I was Chief of Staff for the Armed Forces Staff College. Chief of Staff to Admiral Haley. Any of you ever know Admiral Haley? I'll tell you a little story about him. He was a real cat. Okay. He wore his hair down where it was almost collar level. One day, and he was also had the commanding officer of the Saratoga, I guess, perhaps. I got to know him on there. And he asked me to be his Chief of Staff. But what I remember about him was his day on doing inspection aboard the carrier, and all of the white hats all lined up. He came to this one white hat, looked him square in the eye, walked past him, and turned around and came back. Lifted up his white hat, his hair fell down on his shoulder. Captain Haley said to him, he said, youngster, there's only room for one cat on the ship, and that's me. After I duty at the Armed Forces Staff College, I retired after 29 years of service. I got my license in real estate. I stayed in Virginia Beach. Still working. I still have a real estate company. I still have a mortgage company, title company, insurance company. Spent half my time in Florida with my lovely wife of 64 years. And enjoy life. She would be here today, but she's just finishing a stint in the hospital, doing fine, on Wednesday. Now, I'd like to see if we have any questions. I know I've been all over the place. I know I haven't done the usual all World War II conversation here, discussion with you. If there's any questions anyone might have. Yes?
Question.
Annually, you've got to be back on December 7th. Empire State. The new facility just been commissioned about 6 months before the war started. Originally, BP-23 at 4,000.